Business Source is proudly sponsored by JCH Communications. When it comes to marketing, we mean business. From websites to videos, we can guarantee you a return on your investment. Take a look now on our website at our video, www.jchcom.com. Hi, and welcome to Business Source, brought to you by Connecting Business. Our thanks, as always, go to our great sponsors over at JCH Communications for all your digital marketing needs. And now the show that gives you authentic conversations to help your business. No smoke and mirrors, just real people sharing their experiences. I'm your host, Lee Nightingale, and today I'm joined by a great friend and fellow business owner that specializes in the construction consolidation center logistics industry. Please welcome Matt Barker, Managing Director of CSB Logistics. So without further ado, let's get into it. Matt, thanks for joining me on the show today.
How you do, Lee? Thanks for getting me on the show.
No worries. You and I have known each other for several years now through our love of business and growing business and networking. First introduced through a golf networking business. We both have a significant passion for that and everything associated with it. And now obviously we help your organization when it comes to the Salesforce CRM platform. So we're sort of getting to know each other on a more deeper business level. But I wonder, first of all, if you can just share a short summary around how CSB Logistics helps its clients and what its purpose is.
Well, yeah, CSB is 30 years old. It is now wholly focused in construction projects, providing supply logistics control, so just-in-time delivery, what we call the last mile delivery, although it's probably a few more than just 1 mile. We're probably 6 miles from the centre of London, 3 miles from Canary Wharf, and we at the consolidation centre materials from all over the world, actually, in various supply chains for major projects come into us. Then we just in time deliver those materials to the projects as they need them. So yeah, we've been developing that for probably the last 20 to 25 years. Back in the days when my father started the business in '89, it was more about exports, major oil and gas industry projects. But yeah, similar logistics needs, just outbound rather than sort of inbound, and that flipped in the early '90s when Canary Wharf was kicking up as a big development.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I mean that's a hell of a vision from your father there to sort of switch from that, that whole international outbound distribution, which is completely different from sending stuff internally on, because obviously there's boats and all sorts of container ship issues and everything going on with the shipping out, but now you're almost on the flip side of that. You're on the other end of it. People are shipping stuff to you, and then you're sending that on to construction sites only at the point of when it's needed, so that stuff's not taking up valuable space on site, right?
Yeah, we do the whole supply chain as well, potentially from source to UK import, and so the sea and air freight stuff, we still do that on an inbound basis, and occasionally still do the odd export as well. But who knows? We'll see how that goes. That continues in Europe. Not so much maybe at the moment.
Would have been great to get some of the Dubai work, I suppose, with all the construction going off there. Is it still that Dubai's got most of the world's cranes there building, or has that seemed to sort of slow down a bit?
I mean, I don't know too much about Dubai, but I know it's there's quite a bit of construction going on there, isn't there? I've not been invited out to help anybody manage their logistics as yet, but
I do worry about all of that concrete being built on sand.
Yes, yeah, that is a concern, I would imagine, but
yeah,
big pile.
Yeah. So CSB then, and your journey with it. Obviously, your father started the business in '89. What's been your journey throughout of all of that? Because you don't just become MD day one as your career, right? It requires significant amount of knowledge and experience within the industry and the business. So what's your journey been?
Well, I joined the business in '99. Sort of change career, complete change. I don't think my dad thought either of his sons would end up in the business, and we both have. So that was a surprise for us all, I suspect. I started it, in the warehouse with the guys, understanding how it all operated. Eventually moved into the office and management sales, out chasing cranes and talking to people on sites at project offices and understanding what their supply needs were. And then through all of that time, fairly focused on continuous improvement and driving up quality standards and best practices, understanding how other industries work best, and trying to bring that into construction logistics. And quite a lot of scope for improvement back in the day, and still is. But that's always been a personal drive for me to try and find out the best possible ways of doing things, embrace technology as much as we possibly can, and keep innovating. And eventually became, through various parts of director, operational director, and MD in 2008. So I've been running the company as MD for some years now.
And what do you see? I mean, not talking about the industry, talking about well, possibly, but your business specifically. What have you seen been the major challenges for you over the sort of past 10 years or so, and how you've had to adapt the business?
Well, I think the last thing, I mean, I would have liked to have seen much more of engagement at sort of main developer and main contractor levels, possibly more pressure from local authorities to try and move construction logistics forward, and improve the way that it operates. There's still, obviously, everybody can see, who lives in a sort of the metropolitan area will see the issues of congestion. They'll know about the well-known kind of air quality issues. And then there's things like safety for pedestrians and cyclists on the roads, obviously quite often reported. Incidents involving HGVs, and then there's the construction sites themselves not necessarily operating or receiving materials in the best way that they can to make sure that they're as productive as they can be. So there's a lot involved in logistics that we're constantly trying to move things forwards. I personally would have liked to have seen things change massively. Over the last 20 years, there's been a lot of effort, a lot of studies, TfL trying to progress things, and yet you always get resistance in this when change is being talked about and trying to be driven forwards. And it's probably just a bit slower than I would like. That's probably an understatement. But things, I think, probably last 5 years, I think we've seen more significant changes in attitudes, and through necessity, I suspect there is more pressure from the local authorities, certainly on things like road safety and air quality. I welcome anybody in top levels of construction, developers, main contractors, and second tiers to really be looking at their supply chains and see how things can be transformed, really. And I think there is quite a lot of scope still yet to be done. I see that as our role.
In terms of the planning, conversations you and I have had, you shared that it feels like people leave this constructions logistics plan too late in the process, and then it becomes more of a sort of frenzied, hurried thing, and rather than making it part of the consultations right at the beginning of the project, and having someone like you, and obviously the other businesses are out there, but having someone around like you around the table at the start of the project when the planning phase is going on, where you can help them understand best practices and most efficient ways of delivering that project, right?
Yeah, it doesn't really, as sad as it is and surprising maybe to some people, it doesn't really happen to get people like us involved that early on. Certainly not until, the last couple of years. There's been pressure from TfL and an organisation I'm involved with called the Construction Logistics Improvement Group, and Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport as well, heavily involved. But try and get an agreed template for a construction logistics plan. That's been established. There's now kind of trying to get local authorities, each borough in London, to adopt that as a standard, and then get that looked at right from the very start of a developer's thought process in terms of its planning. So from the outline planning stage, when they submit their designs and their plans to that local authority, with that will go a construction logistics plan. And that's really new kind of, really, it's been developed over the last couple of years as a standard, but there are still plenty of boroughs that haven't adopted that as their way of working. And certainly in terms of pressure on the developers, how much that construction plan is enforced, should we say, when it comes to the actual commissioning of a building and construction starts. That's still stuff that we've got to wait and see how that's being sort of policed and encouraged. So yeah, I think that's probably why I was saying it's not a lot. I haven't seen enough change that I'd like to have seen. This is relatively new stuff. We really should have. I mean, we've been mopping up the problems of disorganisation and lack of planning for most of those 20-25 years. So at some point, there's work for us to do. It's mostly a bit firefighting kind of activity that happens when there's a delay to site, or maybe even high winds is causing a problem, supply chains causing problems. Shift in the timescale of the project causes all the supply chains to sort of bunch up, and we're a buffer in the middle to try and fix all that. But if you put it in at the beginning, and thought processes and all the experiences that we've got, then those construction logistics plans become more than just meaningful. They become a complete tool for dictating how that site will operate as a logistics operation, as opposed as well as the assembly and installation of materials and equipment on site. Too often, what people call construction logistics, they think is just in the site boundary of the site, and it's things like security and banksmen at the traffic marshalling and hoist operations and sweeping up and moving waste bins around. Really, construction logistics goes from the site gate, from that activity outside to the local community, right out to the source of each supply chain. That's what I call construction logistics, and that's to the extent of which those plans need to be thought through.
Yeah, well, wonderful. And you mentioned obviously you want to see change happen much sooner, and I think fundamentally something's got to. But what interests me and where I want to go now is, it's funny how significant, compelling events force change to happen rapidly. I'm talking specifically about the Olympics, because massive changes were made leading up to and during and probably immediately after those Olympics. in order to accommodate and the volume of people. Obviously, you can't have all those trucks going in during the day, from a safety and congestion and pollution and all of that sort of thing. So it's funny how things significantly changed during that period, but we've defaulted back to the norm. So I wonder if you can share maybe what did change during the Olympics to logistics, because I'm imagining obviously one key thing that's springing to mind is nighttime deliveries, which feels like that sounds like a great answer, but that in itself has its challenges and problems and objections and everything like that. So can you maybe just share a bit about your experience during that period?
It's quite, it's amazing, isn't it, to think that probably the things that were set up for the Olympics, London 2012, it's 10 years ago. And yeah, there were very, very well thought out and plans, and there was functions and parts of the system were put in place to make sure that that happened successfully, and it absolutely did. If anybody can remember, the fears of congestion and in terms of pedestrian and vehicle congestion were completely unfounded. It was very easy time in terms of roads and travelling around, whether that be by car or by public transport or pedestrian. So the things that were put in place were a consolidation centre, big consolidation centre set up for the Olympics, as well as holding parks outside up into the sort of M11 area. And nighttime deliveries were allowed, which, you know, in most instances is a sort of shock horror. Can't possibly have HGVs reversing around and making noise and reversing bleepers going on. That all got accommodated, and a very well thought out processes were established to make that happen. The so-called legacy of the Olympics didn't, in terms of logistics, didn't happen. We didn't continue doing the nighttime deliveries for freight into the city or in and around the metropolitan area. Doesn't really happen to this day, and I think that's a bit of a shame, really. Equally, consolidation centres didn't become kind of the norm in terms of how to better stage that last mile delivery into, you know, into London. And I think both of those things got lost a little bit and should have kind of become much more established as a norm.
What do you, I know this might sound like an obvious question, but what do you see as being the advantages of the nighttime deliveries, and in your mind the disadvantages? You know, because there's always pros and cons to everything, right? So,
well, the obvious concerns would be from you know, local residents and the local authorities, with a perception of how upsetting nighttime deliveries could be. It's mostly to do with noise, and obviously there's got to be some careful study of an area and a process and what's involved in a particular instance where a nighttime deliveries could be considered. Each case, there will be cases where it's probably not viable, but in many cases, I think there's ways and means in which that noise, the abatement of noise, can be sorted out. Any concerns over that, like the rule there was done for the Olympics.
Which was what? You know, what sort of things did change in order to abate their concerns over those nighttime deliveries?
Well, one of the main things is the reversing klaxons on the vehicles going back. You know, there's in terms of a normal delivery vehicle, those are a legal requirement, but you know, they're mostly there for the time of day when there's lots of people around. Obviously, at night there won't be, and even then, as long as you've got good traffic marshals and banksmen to reverse a vehicle, then there's no reason really, I don't see, for those noisy alarms to be going off are not necessary in that instance. So that shouldn't be a reason for us not using
Yeah, and I
nighttime
think
deliveries.
it's also down to what's being delivered, right? You know, if you're talking about steel, metal, heavy sort of things, you know, machinery and whatever that's going to make a lot of noise being delivered at night versus boxes, shipping containers, stuff that makes little to no noise and is maybe just a forklift, a silent electric forklift, taking stuff on and off. You know, you can choose what can be delivered at night and what has to be delivered during the day, because there's just no way to make it silent or quiet delivery, right?
I think, well, I mean, there's other types. I mean, there's night, when we talk about retiming, it doesn't necessarily have to just be about nighttime either. It can be, there's special times of the day where construction freight, for example, could go in early before, say, the rush hour, and then, after the fact, not necessarily bang in the middle of the night. It is difficult, particularly construction, to consider a site being operational sort of 24 hours a day. Will have its own issues with noise that isn't to do necessarily with vehicles, but as you say, certain things being delivered. So waste bins, for example, they and skips, they make quite a bit of noise when they get dropped on the floor. But there are companies I know that are looking into how they can reduce the noise of not only their vehicles, but how those bins get put down. So there's a lot. Yeah, there's where there's a will, there's a way. In most cases, I think there's probably enough could be done to ensure that we could deliver at different times other than 9 to 5 or whatever.
Yeah, and speaking explicitly about the vehicles themselves, clearly they're diesel engine or petrol. I don't know. That's not my world, but they're certainly mechanical, and they make a lot of noise when operating. So, is it in your mind's eye? And just take the current situation. We can't foresee what's going to happen with regards to technology in vehicles going forward. But based on what we've got now, is electric HGVs, lorries, delivery trucks viable? Is it an option that we're just choosing not to use, or does it simply not work?
Well, certainly for smaller like van deliveries, small light goods vehicles.
Yeah, I think Amazon, other delivery services are available, of course, but I think they've started with a load of electric vans. You know, so
I mean, obviously it brings into the argument where those materials are coming from, what the distance of that journey could be for. So where does the distribution centre exist that can service, say, the centre of London that's all part of the mix with making that work. But the problem with, and then to welcome that, I mean, we would certainly consider smaller vehicles of electric vehicles going into town from our centre. We're very local to the centre as it is anyway, so we could bomb backwards and forwards without too much of an issue. However, larger, it isn't proven technology for large HGVs. Our hauliers will certainly have opinions to say on that. They've not seen any example yet where there's a viable HGV running on electric. I think possibly, who knows what the future, but hydrogen may be a better place to be looking in that respect. But yeah, in terms of the fossil fuel side of things, that's going to be a difficult one for large vehicles to solve. As it happens, in terms of air quality, the new Euro 6 diesel engines are good, very good, and so that the low emission zone that's extending all the time. Those vehicles, those new HGV trucks and rigids or Arctics, they're all Euro 6 vehicles in London, and that is effectively cleaning the air.
Interesting, yeah. Because people like mentioned Amazon, but also like Royal Mail, for example, and they operate all throughout the night, getting mail to their distribution centers. So it's happening, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I think
it's not happening in the construction industry. It's in terms of deliveries, of our parcels, if you like, and mail. It's already happening.
mm, yeah. I think there's a lot being done, as you say. The likes of Amazon are very much on the forefront of driving things. They've got the capacity to do that. For the smaller operators, it's probably not as easy to
Mm.
get the accessibility to it is not there yet. But yeah, we encourage it if we could. As I say, if we could get a few small vehicles on the road, electric vehicles bombing in and out of London, that would be great. But what's the right vehicle for construction is typically requires quite a wide range of vehicles, and then mostly a lot the larger type of vehicle.
Yeah. Um, I don't want. I want to talk about TfL slash Mayor of London slash government in terms of policy and we're not here to point fingers, name names, etc. But what do you see as the where's it breaking down in terms of moving things forward? Obviously, things are taking far too long. What would you like to see happen, and at what level? What needs to happen?
Wow.
Big question, huh?
Sure. I think probably one of the main issues is that I can't remember exactly how many boroughs there are in London, but there's lots, and there's lots. Every single one is slightly different way of working, slightly different flavour of its sort of own personal agendas, for its locality. And I think that causes problems in terms of getting a unified response to things and establishing a standard for certain things. It's a constant frustration for me to see differences from one borough to a neighbouring borough, let alone disparate parts of London. Where we are in Greenwich, we've got Greenwich and then Bexley the other side, and Lewisham and Southwark. And there's no real kind of no commonality between all of those for what we do in terms of construction logistics and agreeing the right way forward. And some will push much more than others. And it requires that kind of unified drive. Things would happen then. I think that's the main problem for me. I don't think it matters who's in position of mayor necessarily. TfL has consistently tried to do progressive things, but if it keeps hitting kind of resistance, whether that's from developers or from local authorities, then the effort it falters, and it falters almost to a point of stop in certain circumstances. So I think progressive change needs absolute unity across most boroughs. I don't know how you would do that, but I think that's
Let's face
key
it,
barrier.
this challenge is escalated somewhat with London being as big and as dense as it is. But if we can make some headway and progress in London, it can impact other major cities and towns around the country, right? Everyone can benefit if we can get that resolved. I think when we look at the options, one that I know some people may be thinking of is, well, we've got the River Thames. That's a waterway that goes through which we've got great big barges. Why don't we move stuff around like we used to back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, on the canals, but why do we use the river? And I know obviously there was a TfL study. I don't necessarily want to dig too much into that, but just really conceptually, what do you see as being potentially good, and is it even being used today? Is stuff being delivered using the Thames? But on the flip side, what challenge, you've solved one problem, normally you raise another. I'm imagining it doesn't solve the whole end-to-end problem.
Yeah, no, I mean it's always been one of those sort of hot topics, isn't it, about using the river better, and certainly in construction, it's always been kind of a push to see what can be done and utilise more. There's, yeah, I don't know why it's become a very massive topic for a while, when really there was some fairly clear, obvious constraints that could have just been discounted straight away. I mean, if you've not got, unless you inside, so from Canary Wharf into the city into the West End, if you've not got a development right on the river, there's no point bringing materials up by barge, and whatever they are. If you've then got to stick it on a vehicle for another mile or two inland, yeah, it just doesn't work. So that, discount that. There are projects where it's being used. Certainly, waste away from sites is happening. Has been happening for a long time. So bulk materials and inbound to an extent, and certainly waste materials out by barge happens. Actually, one of the things the study did come up with was the realisation that probably I think it's about 80% of bulk materials comes in from up the river, as far as it possibly can do on a large basis. So we've got in Greenwich here, we've got wharves right there on the peninsula operating, taking shiploads of bulk materials in and putting them onto the railheads that are right there as well, and distributing bulk materials further on, even up country. So yeah, there's actually quite a lot of use of the river in terms of bulk material. Obviously, things like mechanical plant, electricals, glazing, lift equipment, and all that sort of stuff that we tend to deal with at the Construction Consolidation Centre, and furniture fit out materials. I can't see that going up on a barge, but if your place was right on the river, then perhaps odds are. It's another one of these plan measures to consider. In a construction logistics plan, you've got to look at whether you can use the river and what you can use it for, and put that into your plan, even if it's just materials away from site or whatever it can be. But it's another one.
There's still got to be a vehicle sat there waiting for it to collect the goods that you've taken. So I guess that's part of the whole consolidation thing, and making better use of having minimal vehicles optimally used where they're never running around empty. So delivering and taking away. I think this is something that we spoke about on a previous call we had. Making sure that a no van, truck, lorry goes in full and comes back empty. How can we consolidate and say, right, put maybe I'm coming up with something that's not out there, don't you? But some sort of platform website out there that the logistics industry can go in and say, okay, I need stuff taking away. Who's got a van coming in that's currently planned to go out empty? Can I make use of that? That is, would be a wonderful way of doing it. Reducing the amount of vehicles for sure.
Yeah, I mean, one of the main benefits of what Consolidation Centre can do is that it for that last, say the last mile, be more like 10 miles, maybe 6 to 10 miles or 15, depending on how far close to the project you can be. The benefit of that process is that any vehicle going from that centre into a site or sites is pretty much fully laden going out. and yes, can bring materials back, either returns for supply chain, stillages, pallets, packaging, waste materials in bins potentially back to the centre. So it's being completely utilised both ways. Most supply chains don't work like that. If they're delivering direct from the middle of the country or from Europe, a direct delivery, that vehicle will be doing several trips as a groupage load. So who knows? It may have just a few pallets left on it by the time it's got up to Oxford Street, and doing, whether it's roaming around pretty much empty. Vans equally. I'm sure if we had see-through vehicles, be quite an interesting thing to see. But
yeah, well, I mean, look at the likes of Amazon and DPD and Royal Mail even, they go to their distribution centre in the morning, they fill their vans and cars and trucks and everything up. They spend all day making 200 deliveries and then they drive back empty. Be interesting, if you could figure out an optimal way of getting them full again on the way back out, whether they go to some sort of waste center, dry waste, cardboard, plastics, whatever, where they can, once they've done their deliveries, all go there, get a load of the stuff, fill the van out, and away you go. But yeah, I'm sure there's you've got some wonderful ideas, and I'm looking forward to over maybe another beer at some point when we can get together and chatting those ideas through with you. But for now, Matt, thanks so much. It's been a real pleasure to get to understand your business more, understand what role you play within the organization, and just how proactive you are and how willing you are to want to help to solve these problems and drive change, and making sure that your business is operationally efficient, and you're addressing safety and pollution and all these things. It is going to take time. We can't solve all those problems in just like that, but we have to try. That's and from everything that you and I have talked about, you've always understood the challenges with all these different areas, and you've got thought around potentially how we could solve things. So kudos to you. Congratulations on CSB and keeping going for such a long time. Long may it continue.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Wonderful. Thanks, Matt, for joining us, and thanks everyone for joining us on another episode of Business Source. Please do check out Matt Barker of CSB Logistics on LinkedIn. Obviously, go to their website, and if you have any logistic needs. Matt, thanks very much. Take it easy.
Thanks, Lee.